Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Transforming Insights into Impact with Learner Discovery. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Zach Sorrells. I'm going to be your host. If you haven't already, being inspired by the catchy, funky music, could you introduce yourself in the chat box? Say hello. What's your name? What's your organization or institution you're with? And why did you come today? What was the reason for showing up? Just in the chat box, say hello. All right, good to see you guys. So you see some friendly faces there. Okay, while you're introducing yourself, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So today's webinar is titled "Transforming Insights and Impact with Learner Discovery," and we are super excited that you made it here today. And I just want to take a moment to thank you for coming. I know everybody is super busy. Nobody has extra time on their hands. So genuinely appreciative of you taking an hour out of your busy schedule and deciding to spend it with us today. So my name is Zach Sorrells. I'm your guide today. And I'm the CTO and head of program development at Skillfuence. My background is working around commercialization, innovation, skills development, and I've been working with Skillfuence now for about 7 years. And really what I do is I go out and kind of work with universities and research centers and try to understand the challenges that they're having, and typically in the context of knowledge exchange, industry engagement, commercialization, and work to develop programs and solutions to address those challenges. And if you don't know about Skillfuence, this is the first time coming across Skillfuence, who we are, basically our mission really is to help researchers create maximum socioeconomic impact and value from the research while achieving their life and career goals. And we work with over 80 universities across the UK, have trained more than 25,000 researchers, PhD students, professional services, and we I have a team of over 30 trainers in kind of different disciplines as related to knowledge exchange, commercialization, and industry engagement. And through that, and kind of creating context around this webinar today, through that we have a fantastic opportunity working with all of these different universities and researchers and professional services across the country to learn loads, right? We're learning significant amount around this challenge and how to address some of these challenges. And so what we've done is we've started to put together webinars. And the purpose of these webinars really is to share that learning and wisdom and experience with you, with the sector, so that you can benefit from that. And so to that end, we've really kind of turned what was one webinar into two, into three, into four, and this is now our fifth webinar. And we now have a webinar series, right? So we're running a series of webinars every kind of 6 to 8 weeks, kind of depending on how it falls, that explores different topics with the goal of providing you with tools, frameworks, ideas, insights to help you address the challenges that you're facing in your institution. Now, before we get into this webinar, I just want to signpost you to the next webinar, which is going to be fantastic. And it's going to be really focused around evaluation and reporting, right? So as we roll into, dare I say it, 2025, we can start to think about what the end of 2025 will look like and how we can report back on the great year that we've had. Right, so put it in your diaries. 23rd of January, we're going to be digging into this idea of evaluation and reporting. And in the chat box, my colleague Fiona is dropping in a link. You can go ahead and register for that now. We'll put a link to at the end of the session as well. You can register for it then as well. But make sure if you are interested in evaluation and reporting, check this one out. It's going to be fantastic. Okay, so let's get on with this webinar. This webinar is one that I've been looking forward. I've been personally looking forward to for months, really, and really a couple reasons. One is the approach, the tool, if you will, the methodology has been absolutely transformative in how we at Skillfluence think about the challenges, develop programs, market and promote the programs. It's really been a game changer in how we've approached things, right? And so sharing that with everyone is really exciting. The other reason I've been looking forward to this, we've got three exceptional guests joining us today, and I've had the pleasure to work with them over now, some a couple years, kind of building that relationship and doing work together. And they're going to bring just fantastic insight and experience around this, about how they've applied some of this thinking. So the tool is super helpful and useful, but it's going to be brought to life with three exceptional people as well. And so this should be really fun and interesting, hopefully for you guys. So the topic here is around transforming insights to impact with learner discovery. Okay, and the objectives really are around exploring how learner discovery has been used to uncover fresh insights. So we're going to get into some specifics around that. Some of those specific key insights that have been identified in that process specifically related to knowledge exchange, commercialization, and enterprise education. And third, how these insights have informed program design. So literally, based on that learning, how has that impacted the way we're going to deliver this program, right? And so you're going to come away with this, hopefully, an understanding of how to use the tool and the approach, but also some very specific learnings that our guests have gained through implementing this approach. Okay, sound good? Still with me? All right, let's do this. Okay, so our guests today are going to be Lynn McDonald. She's the head of a knowledge exchange enhancement at University of Hull. Sally Charles, enterprise program manager at MPLS, the University of Oxford. And Adam Majumdar, who is the senior industry engagement and commercialization manager at the University of Strathclyde. Okay, now before we bring them in, I just want to do a little bit of scene setting, right, to kind of make sense of this. Okay, so how did we get? Okay, so we work with universities across the country, and we typically, the starting point for the work that we do will be a conversation, right, trying to understand what their needs are, what the challenges are, what they're trying to do. And we typically would ask a series of questions, right, to really start to understand this. We'd ask, well, you want to run a program? Well, who's it for, right? Be reasonable. And we get some responses there. Ask another question, why do you want to run this program? Why do you want to run this specific program? Okay. And they go, well, why is it this specific content or topic that you want to cover? Right? And often we ask, well, what has the engagement been like in this program in the past, or programs like this in the past? Right. And we'll get a range of responses related to this, right? So it's like, well, we need to be running something for PhD students, or we need to be running something for, like we have to do that, right? Why are we doing this program? Because we've been told that we need to do something around knowledge exchange or commercialization. We need to increase that, right? And well, or why in this content or topic? Well, that's on the framework of things. We have to do communication skills. We have to do presentation skills, right? And then we get into an engagement piece, and typically the engagement piece is mixed, to be honest, right? And imagine you guys will feel that, right? As we put programs on, you've got situations where a bunch of people come to, and a bunch of other people, not so many people come to. Right? Now, to be clear, we were part of this problem and this challenge, right? Because you come to us and we'd say, well, what are you looking for? And you say, oh, we need a communication skills program. We say, okay, we got a communication skills program, right? Or, oh, we need to do something around knowledge exchange. Oh, we got a knowledge exchange program, right? And you put it on, and not necessarily that many people would come, right? And it wouldn't necessarily move the dial in terms of the KPI that you were trying to deliver against. Right? Then something changed. Something happened. There was an aha moment. And this is kind of leading into what we're doing now. And what happened is, when I'll kind of bring on Lynn in a second, is we were doing work with Lynn at the University of Hull. And what they came to us with was around trying to do a program to increase the levels of knowledge exchange, right? And it was a pretty in-depth program. So it wasn't like we just want to, but they wanted to develop a pretty in-depth program, right? And it wasn't just about, hey, we want to workshop, we want to do something significant. And what that led us to do as part of that development process was to do a lot of learner discovery interviews with stakeholders, with participants, all of these different types of people, to really understand what was going on. And as we did that, and we kind of did a couple cycles of that, we realized that what we had thought was the thing we were going to do in the first place was the wrong thing to do. Had we done what we thought we were going to do in the first place, it would have been the wrong thing. And we were able to get so much learning through that act of learner discovery that what we started to then do was to start to deploy that with other universities that we were working with, specifically with Sally at Oxford and Adam at Strathclyde. And it's become a fundamental part of our approach, because it is just the insights and information that you get. It allows you to make well-informed decisions about what we should be doing and how we should be doing it. Okay. So with that said, and so the reason why I'm doing this session today, the reason why we're doing this session today is I think more people need to be doing this. Whether you do it with Skillfuence or whomever, you do it yourself, however, that is that's besides the point. The act of doing this activity of doing effective learner discovery before developing and designing these programs is so powerful and so helpful. I think we all should be doing more of this, right? I think it takes us to a much better place. Okay. So with that setup, let's go ahead and bring our first guest in. So Lynn, could you turn your camera on and you maybe give us a wave so we know.
Hello.
Where you at? You out
Can
there?
you see me?
Can we see you?
My camera's on. Can you hear me?
Okay. We can hear you. We can hear you. Oh, there we are. There you are. Now
You've
we can
got
see.
me.
Now we can see. All right, cool.
Cool.
Let's just start here. So Lynn, maybe if you could just quickly introduce yourself. So who are you? What do you do? Just a quick introduction to how you're coming at this.
Sure. Okay, hi. So I'm Lynn MacDonald, Head of Knowledge Exchange Enhancement at the University of Hull, and that really sort of covers sort of capability and capacity around knowledge exchange. So it's really working with our academics and researchers to enable them around the sort of full gamut of knowledge exchange, which covers quite a wide remit. And I've been enrolled for 2 years now.
Cool. So just kind of as we start to kind of create some context around this, when you started on this, or when we started on this journey, could you kind of maybe give us a quick overview of what you were trying to achieve? You were saying, okay, we wanted to develop a program around this. Could you give us a sense of where you were trying to get to?
Sure. So when I joined the university, discussions had already been taking place with Skillfuence around the development of what was badged at the time as a KE qualification. There was recognition that knowledge exchange felt still a very nascent area for the university, and we had individuals and pockets of excellence across the institution in different faculties and schools, but we did not have that sort of broad level of knowledge exchange understanding. So we felt as though we wanted to deliver a quite in-depth programme for our academics and researchers that would give them all the sort of knowledge exchange tools to equip them to better undertake knowledge exchange activities in their roles. But we soon realised, I think, when we were trying to develop this programme, that what we were coming up with, and certainly the learner discovery, as Jack has mentioned, was really that aha moment. What we had sort of developed up until that point was very generic. And then we really needed to understand that if we were going to get sort of interest in this programme, whatever it ended up being, that we actually needed to meet the needs of individual academics and researchers and give them what they wanted. And actually try and almost bespoke it, not to an individual level, but certainly to a cohort level, so that it was going to be specific and targeted for them and add value.
So were there anything kind of specific, any specific things where you kind of significant changes in your understanding of either the participants or the challenge that kind of went from pre-discovery to post-discovery?
I think we started to try and focus some of our thinking around delivering impact through various key activities and various key pathways. And I think that really helped us sort of narrow down what we needed to do to give our academic community and our researchers the best tools to be able to deliver impact from their research. Because I think, you know, we've got to remember all of our key activity stems from the research, really. So it was to really support them and enable them to do the best in terms of key from their areas of research.
So when you think about, so where you were before and you were thinking about this kind of certificate, a certificated program, right?
Yeah.
To where it is now. Can you maybe really just kind of explain how that's changed?
So I think what we've tried to do, what I've tried to do, is ensure that whatever we're going to deliver sort of fits with our institutional strategy. And we have a recently internally launched, it's not launched externally yet, research and knowledge exchange strategy that was just launched last month. So everything that we are trying to do and deliver with Skillfuence and, you know, whatever else in terms of learning and development has got to sort of meet the need in terms of delivering against the aims within these strategies. So that's been one key driver. What we also did was a bit of a gap analysis, and we realised in particular that we have a real gap around commercialisation skills. And actually our knowledge exchange team had a gap in that area as well. And that part of the team's been built up quite significantly over the past year. So obviously with the gap in terms of that support, we then have, you know, correlating academics and researchers that have a real lack of skills around commercialisation. And we've been able to do that, you know, with other areas of impact as well, focus on, you know, what we should be doing and where that sort of gap is between what we are doing and what we should be doing.
Yeah, and I'm kind of building on that as well. I know for when we were going through that, there were a few rounds of learner discovery, and I think one of the things that really stood out from as informed design has been the emphasis on, let's call it, income generation in the broadest sense, right? And not just like commercialization, but one of the things that really stood out was we need, you know, resources and, to be crass, money to be able to do the work that we want to do. And so it started to say, well, if that is the challenge, then how do we line things up to get focused on that as much as possible?
Yeah, and I think, you know, we were quite explicit about that, that, you know, we weren't trying to pretend it was something else. This is about, particularly, you know, at this point in time when, you know, every institution is facing quite a few challenges. The first sort of impact accelerator that we're going to be delivering with Skillfuence is around that commercialisation piece and income generation, because, you know, we have to be quite upfront about that. That is a priority for us to generate more income. So I think, you know, being honest about what we're trying to do is, you know, make sense for the academics and researchers as well, that they understand, you know, the reasons sometimes behind some of the priorities and why we're not delivering training on, for example, public engagement at the moment. While that is another priority of ours, it's the first one for us has got to be commercialisation.
Yeah, and I think building on that as well is that I remember that we did, you know, we did a couple rounds of learner discovery, and the first round we did, one of the rounds we did was that we actually, you guys had pointed out, hey, we think these would be the people that'll be good for this type of program. And we interviewed them, and probably out of 12 people, maybe 4 were actually like really interested in, and it felt like there was a mismatch. And like that for us, I think for you guys as well, that was an interesting moment because like, whoa, wait a second here, who is this for? And it could have been like kind of been a moment of like, what do we do now? But in fact, what it enables us to do is saying there are four people who this is really good for. But what are the characteristics of those four people? And now that we understand that, we can now go out and find more people like that who
Yeah,
this program will be good for. So we're not, because otherwise we could have been having like, 70% of the people on this program, the program wasn't actually right for them.
exactly that. And I think through the learner discovery, we've been able to make sure that actually what we've designed, what Skillfuence has designed for us, is actually going to meet the needs. So engagement, will be high. We'll get a good sort of a feedback on that, and it provides us with the evidence to then continue with this program and develop others in the same sort of vein. So it's all about that sort of evaluation and evidence building as well, for us to be able to go back to our directors and say, actually, this is works really well, and this is the sort of evidence that demonstrates that it's something we need to do again, or we need to look at something similar for community engagement, contract research, whatever it may be,
Right.
to try and provide those skills across our academic base.
Cool. I'm going to press pause there for a second, Lynn. So, guys, in the audience, after kind of Lynn and Adam and Sally get to kind of share their perspective, we're going to bring everybody on a kind of a bit of a panel discussion, right? So, if you have questions, jot those down or drop them in the chat box, and we'll open it up for a broader conversation. So, if you had anything you wanted to ask Lynn specifically about her experience, take a note of that, and we can come back to that. But Lynn, thanks for that. We're gonna jump over to Sally now, and kind of get her perspective, because she's coming at it from a totally different perspective in terms of the challenge that they were working on. Sally, great to see you.
Hi, Zach.
Thanks for hanging out with us today. Maybe just quick introduction. Who are you? What do you do?
I am the Enterprise Programme Manager at MPLS, which is a division of the University of Oxford. It is the division of all the STEM subjects, maths, engineering, chemistry, physics, biology, and a few more.
Cool. And just like Lynn, can you give us some context when what was it that you were working on, the challenge when we started this conversation, and kind of which led to some learner discovery activity?
So I just joined the university back in February, took up this position, and previously I'd been working at Robert Gordon University in Aberdeen, and I'd been there for about 5 years working with the Entrepreneurship and Innovation Group. And one of the things that you realize when you are doing enterprise education after a little while is it's a particular type of person that comes to those programs, and you begin to recognize the profile. And the thing about that is, in enterprise education, we talk about all the tools. We teach them the tools about customer segments and the value proposition and customer discovery and getting out of the building and doing all of that research. And so I'd gone through that process previously at Robert Gordon's, sort of speaking to people where you have to go out and find them and not just expect them to come into that space. And so when I arrived at Oxford, because the audience that I was going to be working with was really quite different, I was looking to do that exercise. And then we got into a conversation, and we've partnered on that process, and it has been incredibly helpful to have a partner. It's really accelerated that process.
Cool. And can you maybe share some specific insights or kind of takeaways, maybe aha moments, or maybe even just validated what you believe to be true, kind of as you went through that process?
So some of it has been around validation. So some of the things that I was sort of already aware of were people have issues with the language that's often used around enterprise education. I mean, even words like commercialization, people can have a problem with them because it's not necessarily why they got into doing the research that they're interested in. If you talk to them about impact, they're probably a lot more comfortable with that. If you talk to them about implementation, But when you say commercialization and you start focusing on money, it's probably not why they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
We've all come across the Simon Sinek talk about, leading with why, and actually talking to them about why they're doing what they're doing, and maybe shifting the focus of how we market what we do to that space rather than just talking about the money.
Yeah, I remember because I was helping with some of the interviews, and my colleague Marie, she was helping with some of these as well. And it was that there were these, the reaction to some of the language was just fascinating. I thought, I mean, I just didn't realize how loaded some of these words were. I mean, to the point where people were genuinely having actual, physically negative reactions to words like commercialization and enterprise.
Yeah.
And so
And
where you are now in terms of what was the output from that? Could you maybe talk through, because one of the things that was quite unique for what we ended up coming up with you was the output. That hasn't been done for anybody else, and I think folks could benefit from understanding what that tangible output was and how you're using that.
so what our very specific outputs, we focused on two things. We were thinking about strategy. I'll leave that one aside for the moment because I don't think it's the one you're talking about. The second output that we focused on was a number of learner profiles, because across the spectrum of the audience, there are some very different. You might sort of think of it as an adoption curve. There are people who are quite into this stuff. There are early innovators, and there are people who are quite far away from participating. And so thinking about the spread across that, we came up with 6 different profiles. And one of the things we've been quite focused on, as well as the particular types of programs that might suit those profiles, is how we might market them and the language. And I think that's sort of quite a normal entrepreneurship activity to look at the different ways that you would market to different customer segments. So again, very aligned with the subject matter.
Yeah, and we could talk a little bit about as well how, because now you're starting to use that with your team. I think you're also starting to use
Yeah.
it as you communicate to leadership. I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about how you're leveraging that tool, if you will.
So, as I said, we've been working with our comms person to think about the language around that. And we've also, we have a program called Enterprise Innovation and Enterprise Fellows. And one of those fellows is actually doing research on the sort of psychology of learning. And we have involved her in the process of thinking about how we structure our feedback questionnaires, thinking about the advertising for events, thinking about that question you were asking, why have people come to the event? Thinking about how we actually ask those questions and what we do with that feedback once we've got it, and how that feeds back again into the loop of further advertising for different programs and the structuring of the events. I mean, it's a very holistic process in the end. It's quite difficult sometimes to say that this is one thing and where it stops and where it bleeds into the next thing.
Right. Cool. And what are you going to do next with this? And what are your, as you went through it, were there any kind of, do you want to go start digging a little bit deeper in certain areas, learning more? Because I mean, it was a relatively small exercise in the grand scheme of things. Is there anything that you would like to go and learn more about?
Oh, yes. So, I mean, there are some quite big impacts in terms of we are refreshing our website at the moment to make it a better space for the audience that we're now understanding better. We are thinking about the programs that are coming up. We're going to be doing different pilots. We are bringing in, because one of the things that you talked about a little while ago was time. People are time poor, and research communities are particularly time poor. They need to understand the relevance of them investing the time to do an activity. And so one of the things we've been looking at is creating a toolkit, an online toolkit of microlearning as a sort of a taster, a teaser, an entry point so that they can get familiar with some of the language, get familiar with some of the content, and be less intimidated and maybe enthused to come into some of the other programs.
Yeah, yeah. I think that big picture on this and is that it's easy to think of the population that we serve, right? Whether it's PhD students, early career researchers, et cetera, as a single population, right? And we have one thing for them all, but there's so many different profiles within that, and that we really do, to be able to create something that's highly effective, the need to start to get a little bit more specific about the different types of people within that population so we can better service each one of them.
Totally. And I mean, you could go ridiculously to the other extreme because, within the division, there are 9 or 10 different departments. And I would imagine the profile from one department to another department is very different. But there are sort of common characteristics across all of them in terms of their appetite, interest, or the opposite, their disinclination towards these things. And sort of having that understanding of different categories and how you might present and market, getting quite a bit of feedback on the sound.
Cool. Actually, that's probably a good place to stop, Sally. We're going to go ahead. Thank you for that. So especially if your audio is not doing great. So why don't we bring in, thank you, Sally. Great insights. Let's bring in Adam and kind of get it from a third perspective, right? So we've got it from a KE perspective. We've got it from an enterprise education perspective. And Adam brings it really truly from a commercialization perspective. So Adam, if you could maybe say hello, introduce yourself. What's your where are you coming at this from?
Yeah, sure. No, thanks, Zach. And a good conversation there with Sally. We'll maybe pick up on a couple of points in the next in the panel discussion. A few comments really resonated with me. Before we get on to that, so I'm Adam Majumdar. I work at Strathclyde. My job remit covers industry engagement, and that means working with strategic partners, both to work with current accounts and potential future accounts. The other half of my job, which actually is the majority, and the reason I'm on today is to talk about commercialization. So that's really the bread and butter activity of creating spin-outs and commercial licensing. And before I was at Strathclyde, I worked at Glasgow Uni in a similar role there. And we've been working with Skillfuence for some time. We actually had our first kickoff on a new pilot program on Monday. At Strathclyde, we have an entrepreneurial strategy that we're revisiting. We're extending out to 2030. So part of the Skillfuence engagement is feeding into that activity also. I think the main challenge that we were looking at today, at Strathclyde is, how do we really broaden and deepen out the pool of entrepreneurial academics or academic entrepreneurs? I think we're using a lot of terminology that some people may not like or prefer other terminologies that you and Sally discussed earlier, Zach. So please forgive that term because I know entrepreneur can be a bit controversial as well. We'll maybe get onto that. And I think what we're really looking at here is how do we make commercialization a sort of business as usual activity? So when academic and researchers start their career, research obviously is a business as usual activity. It would be odd to teach an academic to think about research and doing research is as natural as what they do. And I think that's where we want to get to with commercialization, that it's also a business as usual activity. I think that's a long-term goal with this here. And I think what we'll get into in the discussion is, how do we enable the academics, the researchers to be confident to do that, to enable them to do that, to have the skills, but also the motivation and broader than that, also the capacity to work in that area. So that's just a quick rundown, Zach.
Yeah, I think that's a great kind of start there, and I think would love to understand, because you and some of your colleagues were involved in the actual interviewing that we did, a number of the interviews. And I do remember a few moments where there was a little bit of a light bulb for folks in the room. Can you kind of highlight anything that maybe really stood out from those conversations that was like, huh, that's a bit new, or hadn't heard that before? Again, it validates what you've been thinking.
We should always do what we tell our potential spin-outs to do, and I think you and Sally touched on this earlier, right? We should always do customer discovery, and I think this is a great exercise as learner discovery piece that Skillfuence do. We need to learn, and we need to learn with academics and researchers to tailor programs that fits the researchers' needs. So we need to hear the voice of the learner, voice of the customer. So that was a learning piece for us. Sometimes time or whatever gets in front of us that we maybe don't do enough of that, and learner discovery was a great opportunity to do that. We did learn a lot. I think what really came to the fore that I think there's a triumvirate or the trio of things that came to light during those conversations around the skill sets, the motivation, and the capacity. Okay, and I think if we can address those three, or at least a number of those three, that will be going a long way to building up the sort of academic entrepreneurial capacity within the research base. I think for me that was a light bulb moment in a way that the researchers were keen to express that. It sort of validated a number of certainly validated that that we needed to look at the motivation aspect as well, and that's something we might discuss a bit further on, and specifically on the skill set side, Zach.
Yeah, digging into that a little bit, because that motivation piece for you guys, specifically, anything that really stuck out to you as related to what was either motivating or not motivating for some of the researchers who would likely be participating in some of the support programs that we're developing?
Yeah, I think one of the most insightful things was around one of the senior academics that we were working with, and I was sat on that call, in that particular learner discovery conversation, where it was clear that his primary motivation was about career progression, right? And often commercialization can be seen as a potential barrier to that career progression, particularly if it takes time away from their research, which is seen as the standard way to go up the ladder to become a professor, right? So I think one learning that we're taking away from that is, how can we motivate the research community by rewarding them, by incentivizing them with career progression opportunities from being involved in commercialization. I think if we knew that some time ago, we could have addressed it. We know it now. I think moving forward, and this we might discuss it later, that's something we're looking at again. So I think motivation is key for the academics. It's clear that they want recognition for their role, for their activities, and I think that was going back to your light bulb point. Yeah. I think that was a clear one for me, Zach.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Why don't we go ahead and just bring everybody on then, because it sounds like that there's some areas that we can explore together. So let's just go ahead and do this, Adam, if it's okay. Let's bring Lynn back on, bring Sally back on, and let's see if there's. I'm kind of actually going to step back for just a second. Is there anything either three of you would like to pick up on what someone else said? What Adam or Sally or Lynn, you said that you kind of either want to, just build upon or explore a bit further?
I just wanted to pick up because I think everybody's mentioned it as the language that we use and how important that is, especially when you're talking about commercialization, because that can be seen like a real sort of dirty word amongst academics, and it's very difficult. When you're working with the academics, the last program that we ran, Zach, with our academics, and we had commercially viable ideas there, but they will state, "Oh, I'm not doing this to make money," and there is a real sort of mindset change that you have to work on sometimes, which is quite challenging. And it goes back to what Adam said about you know, do they see commercialisation as being a barrier to progression in their academic career? And so there's lots of things to consider, I think, and I think commercialisation is one of these areas which does provide us with quite a lot of these challenges.
I think so, and I think there's a balance as well. I think we picked up on language, and it's important to tailor that language across the different customer segments, if I can say that. Although maybe I haven't tailored it for this audience, but I think language is key. It's a balance as well. I think we all recognize that there's some things terminologies we can't avoid, and maybe we shouldn't avoid as well. But at least with the interviews that we are getting, the feedback of what type of triggers we can use that will excite the academic community, I think that's important. With the program that we are undertaking with Skillfuence, which led directly from the learner discovery piece, it's enabling the academics to review, you know, from the outset to assess a research portfolio with a commercialization lens as well as a research lens attached. And it's a way of extending the reach of their research. So you could say it's almost like a roadmap in many ways, that why does the road have to stop at a published paper? And the impact stops there, where, you know, if they can view it with a commercialization lens, you can extend the road, take it further, which will have knock-on effects for the academic. They might be able to increase their funding opportunities into the research group. Ref impact is another angle that we can use as well. So I think that's the way we are using terminology, I think, in language to help us talk to the academics and help them talk to us as well.
I think also enterprise education in this respect can help them not necessarily have to be involved themselves, but to trust the other people who can take their work out and commercialize it, and not see them as a threat potentially, but actually see them as a partner in getting their work out into the world, and that's actually a vehicle for doing that. I did some work a while back with some creative practitioners, and I think there's a bit of an analogy. When we looked at what was involved in selling work, some of them learnt those skills and were very happy to spend some of their time doing those activities, whereas others who had potentially been quite upset about how much money a gallery would take from a sale of a piece of work suddenly understood how much work was involved in selling something and realized they didn't like those activities. And actually, if they could work with a good gallery who could undertake that work, what that did was release them from those activities they didn't have to then do, so that instead of one piece of work and then selling it, they could go and create two pieces of work that somebody else could sell. So I think there's also that process and that opportunity to work with academics, that they don't have to do it themselves, but they can engage with people who can.
Yeah. I think, and one of the things for me as well is like understanding that motivation, capacity, skills, just the awareness of that, to ask the question, what is motivating for you? Like that just to ask that question to somebody, to go, oh, it's not doing a spin out, but it's doing this. Okay, cool. Now we can know what we're working with here, and we can help you do that in the context of this, right? And it seems like such an obvious thing to do, but so many times we forget to ask, well, what is important to you, right? And when you know, the same with the capacity, and you ask, well, specifically, what part of this is hard, right? And really start to dig down, and you just find some nuggets. And for me, what was really interesting about doing with the three of you guys with different perspectives is I learned so much. Like genuinely, I'm smarter about the whole challenge, and Skillfuence is smarter about the whole challenge. And while they're different, but there's so many similarities in terms of what we're looking at. Adam, I got a question for you, because, and this is actually open for anybody as well, but it's specifically because I know we had talked about this, is yes, this activity helped to inform the design of the program, and I think we've got something really cool developed, and I think it's going to go really well. From early results, we're seeing it's kind of hitting the mark. But you've talked a little bit about how this activity is starting to be useful and valuable in other areas as well. I wonder if you could share some perspective on that, if you could.
Yeah, sure. So we're building out the 2030 entrepreneurial strategy for Strathclyde, and part of the work on that is about enabling the research community to get more involved. It's all about widening and deepening that base. We don't want it narrow and shallow. We want it wide and deep, right? And we want to expand the number of academics who want to be entrepreneurial or who want to do sort of commercialization. And how it's helped informing that strategy is two particular strands. What we haven't done to date is to tackle head on the capacity, the workload modeling of academics. So we're asking academics to, if they want to if they want to create a spin out, we're basically saying that they're going to have to work overtime, and they're going to have to work, an extra day a week, 2 days, whatever that is. It's not built into the normal 9 to 5. Now, I know no one works 9 to 5, but it's not factored into the work package, the work stream. So how do we go about addressing that? That's a challenge, but at least we're going to try and tackle that head on. I think the link to that as well is around incentivization and rewarding academics. So when we look at, I think University of Aberdeen, if I can shout out them, they're a little bit ahead in that they have a specific pillar that academics and researchers can point at when they are going for a career promotion, that they can pinpoint a spin out, a licensing activity, a wider piece of commercialization as a building block for being promoted. Whereas historically, it's typically, research or maybe KE defined, but maybe not specifically around spin out. So it's a bit of a firmer recognition in terms of commercialization as a reason for career progression. So it's helped us, and it's going to help us inform our strategy for 2030 about addressing those two things. And I think that's around capacity, the workload, and then incentivization is around motivation. If we can give academics a route to professorship, to a professor by spinning out a company,
Right.
we would expect that pool to be widened. That's the
You would suspect
theory.
a fair few more would engage. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. Cool. Interesting.
Adam,
Lynn,
I think that goes
go ahead,
back to
Sally.
what you were saying about making it business as usual as well.
Yep.
It's not something they have to do extra.
Yeah, it's all wrapped up in that business as usual banner. Sally, you're right. I think it is. And if we fast forward X number of years, it would be odd to be talking around. That's the ambition, isn't it? Right? Is this seen as natural run of standard day business as usual activity? That's the ambition.
Lynn, I saw you nodding there. Is there anything you wanted to add in there?
I think that just really resonates. I think, and it's not just around commercialization. I think a lot of what falls under knowledge exchange is seen quite often as an add-on, as an extra, something else that has to be done. Whereas we want that to be embedded, and it's part and parcel of what they're doing anyway in their roles. So obviously it goes for commercialization, but pretty much anything to me that comes under KE fits under there as well. We don't want that to be an extra, a something else. It's BAU.
Yeah. Cool. I got a couple questions from the audience that maybe just first is, and I'll just help clarify this. And so I realized I should have done this, Laura. I apologize. You won't be the only person that is thinking that. Learner discovery, quite literally, is the act of going out and speaking, and it could be learner or participant or customer discovery, but it's the person you're designing the thing for and going out and doing interviews. Like you might think of it as a survey, but it's not a survey because survey doesn't give you that granular data, like really understanding. It's literally going out and having one-on-one conversations, structured conversations with a likely participant, and we did it in the form of online interviews to try to tease out what are some of the challenges. And at the very end of this, in just a couple minutes, I will kind of outline a specific process for how to do that. Sally, there's a question here. Sally, you mentioned you noticed a particular type of researcher engages with enterprise KE, et cetera. is this true for all of you? Is this true for everyone? Or have you noticed any characteristics that they have in common in terms of the people that are engaging with KE, commercialization, et cetera?
I think for me, I spent a lot of time thinking about this, and it comes down to identity for me. The people who engage are the ones who already perceive themselves as entrepreneurial, whereas the people who don't are probably perceiving themselves or creating an identity as a science researcher. And actually, to engage in these other activities could present a challenge to them, almost a fear of creating identity they don't want to have.
Right.
So the ones that naturally engage are the ones who already see themselves in that light and are drawn to the benefits that are on offer, which is why I think customer or learner discovery is really important, to find out what the pains and the gains are of the rest of the audience, so that we can present what we do in a different way, so that they can still benefit and take different career paths or incorporate it in their career path. And they don't have to change their identity. They just use the tools.
Yeah, yeah. Lynn and Adam, any thoughts on that?
No, completely agree.
Well,
I think that's exactly it.
No,
I
In a
think I
nutshell,
agree.
Sally.
I think I agree also. I might be a bit more long-winded than that. I think we see I think there's a number of customer segments, but I think the one I will highlight here is we see a population of researchers who either participate in what we'd say is industry engagement, like doing research activities with industry partners. And maybe that's maybe a little bit to Sally's point also, that they want to engage with companies, get funding to do research, and where does that go beyond that? I think there's some work to be done on that. And then the other side is the commercialization piece. I get to Sally's point. Yeah, there may be although I don't think they use this term, but the entrepreneurs who want to do some venture creation. So yeah, similar to Sally.
Yeah.
But that
Cool.
profile that you just mentioned, I think, Zach, did we call them the industry seekers?
Yeah, I think that
Okay.
was actually, yeah. You put a name on those is really helpful. It
Yep.
starts,
Yeah.
you can get a picture of them, and you can go, oh, it's one of those, right?
Mhm.
With all, it's in no disrespect, it's one of those, and now I know what's relevant and it's going to work for them, right?
Mhm.
I think this is really interesting. Just keeping an eye on time here. Lyndon has a question about how that discovery activity translates to program participation, and I can answer that. I think it feeds right into it. Right? The people that you're engaging in that conversation, to understand them, if it is relevant, definitely lean forward to participate. And we're seeing that, especially with the work we're doing with Strathclyde and with Lynn as well, is that literally one of the people, the lead participant on one of the pilot program is someone who was involved in the learner discovery. And I would say that person is more bought into the process. Adam, I validate this, confirm this. He's more bought into the process than I think was imaginable. Like he's all in.
Yeah, he is all in, and I think that's another thing, that we need to create advocates within the research community, and get the learner discovery is a way to engage the academics, but also make them advocates from an early stage. If they feel like they're co-creating the program as well, they feel they've got skin in the game. So yes, he definitely bought in, and a future advocate for sure.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to do real quick whip around to get one last comment or thought that you would express to the others in the room, and then I'm going to share my insights and give a specific how-to on do some learner discovery on your own for you guys out there, and then we'll wrap it up. So let's start with Lynn. One word of advice or insight that you'd like to share with the group.
I think just, speak to the academics, do the learner discovery, find out what they want and need, and don't assume.
Cool. Sally.
So this piece of work, I think, is a piece of work that just keeps on giving. I was attending a panel recently around entrepreneurship ecosystem, and one of the speakers said that they thought the people that would be successful in the space had two qualities. One, that they must be in love with the problem, and two, that they must be prepared to act on incomplete information. And thinking about the research audience, I think, yes, totally, they're in love with the problem. Are they prepared to act on incomplete information? Probably not yet.
Yeah, perfect. Great. Thanks. Adam, your final insights.
I think the insight for me is that we need, it's a good way to step back as well. I think too often we're in the weeds and focusing on getting from A to B without maybe taking a more, a balcony approach. There's this concept of being on the dance floor and being on the balcony. Sometimes in our jobs we're on the dance floor because that's where we need to be. Learner discovery is a great way of enacting what we tell startups to do. Talk to our customer, listen to them, get the feedback, and then work from there and design something that's truly eccentric to them and specific, and something that they will engage with.
Brilliant. Thank you, guys. I'm gonna share my insights, but before I do, thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you for being fantastic to work with, and thanks for sharing your insights. I think this has been it's been really valuable for me, the whole process, and hopefully it's been valuable for others. So thank you guys so much. Wrap it up real quick. Couple things I want to share with you guys. Key insights. Learner discovery reveals those real needs, right? We think we know what they need, but the learner discovery reveals them for sure. It helps us challenge assumptions. Again, we believe this to be true. Do we know it to be true? It allows us to create highly tailored solutions, specifically relevant. When they're tailored, they work better. They deliver better results. Boosts engagement, as we talked about right there. We get people involved. It's going to lead to more engagement downstream. Co-creation fosters buy-in. Right? Same thing. Uncovers hidden opportunities. We think it needs to be this big thing, but actually it's this little thing that can help the most, right? And we never would have known that without doing that activity. It also bridges the leadership gap. The thing we didn't talk about too much is that we have to go and sell this to the funders, to the leadership, and this gives us data to say it's not just what I believe to be true, it's what we're hearing. This is the data that we have, right? We have evidence. And this allows us to kind of present a stronger case for why and how we should do certain things, okay? So it's a good thing, right? I think we should be doing more of it. Now, how to do it, right? Because we can do this wrong, right? And we think we're doing it when we're not really doing it. So one of the things people will do is they'll say, I want to go and do a survey with participants. So you write a survey, what training do you need, right? And they'll go, I want project management or I want commercialization, right? But they don't actually necessarily know what they need to get to where they want to go. We don't really understand it. We don't get the depth of understanding. So I propose an alternative approach. We need to define the objective. What is the goal that you're trying to achieve? What is the output? Okay. From that, once we do that, we want to identify the people we would like to help achieve that. Who are those people? Once we've identified them, we do work to understand why do we think this might not be happening? Why do we think they're engaging in the behavior or achieving the outcomes that we want them to do that? What's our hypothesis? Once we have that hypothesis, we generate questions to really dig into those different areas. We go out and we interview people. We've been doing kind of 10 plus, but any number's okay, right, to get you going. The more, it's kind of like do enough to allow you to start seeing. When you start seeing and hearing the same answers over and over again, you've done enough, right? There's no steadfast number, but it's like, what point do you feel like you've understood it? And then from that, you analyze the results, and from that, you design a solution, right? Versus going out and doing a survey, right, and think that's the answer. Doesn't give you the depth of understanding that we need, okay? So this is how I approach it. And where this leads to is the creation of profiles that we can use in all of the ways that we've talked about. We can think about them as ideal participant profiles with what we've done with Lynn at Hull, who's the ideal person to participate in this program. Or we can think about it with what we've done with Sally, where we go and understand the different profiles in the community, in the population. And that helps us to understand how best we can support that population, okay? So final advice and recommendation before I let you go is everything that we do starts with a deep understanding of participants. Without that depth of understanding, how can we deliver highly effective solutions? It would be impossible. We need a deeper understanding. Spend more time with participants, both formally and informally. Formally in the sense of doing formal interviews like this, right? Or informally through lots of conversations. The better we can understand them, the better able we'll be to develop effective solutions. Work to turn those assumptions into validated facts. And one of the words that we start to listen for is like, I think, I feel, right? Could be. When you hear those words, go, huh, do I know for sure? Right? And finally, remember this. Participants can tell us the problems that they're having, but they might not be able to tell us how to solve them. Right? It's the difference between saying, for the expected participants to say, I need a program for like this, but they don't actually know necessarily. What they know is the problems that they have. It's our responsibility to develop solutions or approaches that help them overcome that problem. So with that, hopefully, I've made a reasonable case, or we've made a reasonable case to do more learner discovery as part of your process, right? It takes us to very interesting and I believe more effective places, okay? We are now officially out of time, but like I said from the start, check out and register for the next webinar coming up in January, all around evaluation, right? How are we going to get ourselves set up so that in a year's time, at the end of 2025, we're looking back and going, this is 2025 was a great year, and here's the evidence that I have. If you guys want to talk about anything, drop me an email. I thank you again for your time. I thank you, Adam, Sally, Lynn. You guys are amazing. I owe a coffee or a beer or a few, whatever your beverage is of choice. But hopefully we'll keep working together moving forward. So thank you guys. Thanks for hanging out with us, and we'll see you next time. Take care.